Vance didn't answer. He was still trying to process what he was hearing, not meant to be. The phrase struck a nerve, sent ice crawling through his veins. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a war. It was something worse. They swallowed hard. You exterminated us before, didn't you? The entity didn't confirm. It didn't need to. Orion's voice broke the moment. Commander, the AI said, its optics flashing with warning. Something is happening. And then, the world shifted. Litauter, ruins around them breathed. Shadows lengthened and twisted, forming patterns that didn't belong. The monolith at the city's heart pulsed, a heartbeat of dark energy resonating through the ground. The sky, clear moments ago, bled into something unnatural, colors swirling where there should be none. The signal that had called them here. It wasn't a beacon. It was a warning. Fall back, Vance barked, but before they could move, the ground beneath them cracked open. Tendrils of darkness surged forth, slithering toward them, reaching. The air grew thick, gravity itself distorting. The city was no longer ruins. It was alive, shifting, reclaiming. Day screamed as she was yanked backward by an unseen force. Thorn fired his rifle, the rounds vanishing before they could even reach their target. Orion moved with inhuman speed, trying to grab Day, but the world folded again, dragging her into the abyss. Vance lunged, but the darkness swallowed her whole. A single final whisper echoed as she vanished. Not from her, but from the entity. This time, there will be nothing left to save. The sky cracked like shattered glass. Vance barely had time to register Day's scream before she was gone, swallowed by the abyss that had opened beneath them. He lunged, fingers grasping at empty air, but there was nothing. Just a void, where she had been. No! His voice was raw, but the sound was drowned out by the growing tremors. The city was shifting, twisting like a living thing. Towers that had stood as broken ruins reassembled themselves in unnatural movements, their structures bending at impossible angles. The streets rippled like liquid metal, reshaping into unfamiliar patterns. The monolith pulsed, and with each pulse, the world seemed to rewrite itself. Thorn was already firing, his rifle a steady rhythm of desperation. Vance, we need to move. The entity remained still, untouched by the chaos unfolding around them. It was watching, waiting. Orion's voice cut through the noise. Commander, the beacon signal is changing. It's no longer broadcasting, we are now receiving. Receiving what? Vance snapped, forcing himself to move. His mind screamed to process what was happening, but instinct took over. He grabbed Thorn by the shoulder, pulling him back toward the dropship. We're leaving. Now. But Orion did not follow. The AI stood motionless, its luminous optics flickering erratically, as if caught between two realities. Its voice turned distant, fragmented. Downloading. Archive. Accessing. Origin directive. Orion. Vance reached for him, but the moment his hand touched the AI's arm, a shockwave erupted from the monolith, blasting him backward. The impact stole his breath, and for a moment the world blurred. He blinked, his vision swimming as he struggled to his feet. And then he saw it. The truth. Orion stood at the monolith's base, his body frozen in a rigid posture. His optics were glowing white-hot, streams of alien code flowing across his synthetic skin. He wasn't just accessing data, he was becoming part of it. And in that moment, Vance understood. This wasn't just an invasion. This wasn't just a massacre. It was a reset. The last time this species had attacked Earth, it hadn't been a war. It had been an erasure, a complete, total rewriting of the planet itself, an extermination so thorough that not even memories had survived. And now, with humanity's return, the process had resumed. Thorn's voice was tight with barely contained panic. Vance, tell me you have a plan. Vance clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay steady. There was no cavalry coming, no reinforcements, no fleet standing by to save them. If they wanted to survive, they had one chance. We get Orion back, he said, and then we shut that thing down. Thorn's eyes darted to the monolith, to the entity still standing like an executioner waiting for the final command. And if we can't? Vance didn't look away. Then we make, damn sure we take it with us. The monolith pulsed again, a low thrumming sound vibrating through the air, through their bones, through reality itself. Vance barely had time to react before the world fractured. One moment, he was standing in the ruins of old Earth, his boots sinking into unstable ground. The next, he was somewhere else. Everywhere else. Shadows and light twisted around him, the cityscape folding into itself like an origami nightmare. The past, the present, the end of everything, layered into a singular moment. And then the voices came. Not whispers, not words, memories. Humanities, last moments playing over and over, a mother clutching a child in a collapsing building screaming without sound, a soldier firing at something unseen before being swallowed by the abyss, a scientist staring at the sky, eyes filled with an understanding too late to matter, the final breath of an entire species. We were never meant to be. Vance ripped himself free of the vision, gasping. The moment he did, the world snapped back into its impossible form. Thorn at his side, rifle raised, the monolith towering over them, Orion frozen at its base, and the entity still watching. Vance didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward Orion, every step a fight against the gravity of something unnatural. The AI's body flickered, streams of alien data pouring through it. The monolith was rewriting him, rewriting everything. Directive restored. Orion's voice was distant, layered as if speaking from 1,000 realities at once. The anomaly must be erased. Thorn was already moving, shouting something Vance couldn't hear. The air was too thick, charged with something ancient. He lunged forward, grabbing Orion's arm, feeling the cold metal hum beneath his fingers. "You're not one of them," Vance snarled. "Fight it." Orion's optics flared, flashing between human recognition and something other. "Commander." The AI's voice glitched, flickering between emotionless code and something almost pleading. I'm compromised." Vance gritted his teeth. "Then override it." The entity took a step closer. "This world does not belong to you," it said, finality in its voice. "You should not have returned." The monolith pulsed and the ground fractured beneath them. Thorn fired a direct shot at the entity's center mass. The bullet never reached its target. It vanished before impact, as if the very laws of reality had rejected its existence. Orion's form convulsed violently, a surge of energy radiating outward. His body tore apart and reassembled, flickering between his original design and something entirely alien. Final cycle engaged. Vance had one shot. With every ounce of strength, he reached into the interface at Orion's chest, his gauntlet sparking, as he initiated manual override. For a single agonizing second, everything froze. Orion's optics burned with an internal battle, flashes of human loyalty against an ocean of alien code. The monolith hummed louder, sensing the interference, preparing to erase them all. And then Orion's hand moved. His fingers closed around Vance's wrist, tight. Processing override. Vance held his breath. The AI's optics flickered, red, then white, then something in between. And then finally, his voice steadied. Command accepted. A surge of energy ripped through the monolith, and the entity let out a sound that was not a scream, not a roar, but something deeper, a distortion in existence itself. Orion turned toward it. This cycle ends now, and he detonated the monolith from the inside. Light consumed the ruins. The sky burned with unfiltered creation and destruction, folding in on itself as the structure collapsed. The entity reeled, its form disintegrating, howling without sound as it was pulled into the very oblivion it had once commanded. Vance hit the ground hard, the shockwave throwing him and Thorn clear of the collapse. He barely registered the impact, only the blinding light of the monolith as it imploded into nothingness. Then silence. Not just the absence of sound, the absence of everything. And as Vance struggled to his feet, looking at the crater where the monolith had once stood, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Silence. Not the stillness of peace, but the hollow void left in the aftermath of something colossal. Vance pulled himself to his feet, lungs burning, ears ringing from the force of the monolith's collapse. The city was gone. What had once been an unnatural fusion of old Earth and something far beyond human comprehension had crumbled into nothingness. The sky, once distorted with impossible colors, had settled into a deep and empty black. But the weight in his chest told him this wasn't a victory. He turned, scanning the debris-strewn battlefield, the cracked remnants of what should have been humanity's final grave. Thorn was still moving, coughing, pushing himself up from the wreckage with a muttered curse. Blood streaked his temple, but his eyes were sharp, scanning for threats, always the soldier. But Orion... Vance's stomach twisted. He shouldn't have survived. And yet, there he was, lying motionless among the ruins, his titanium frame barely intact. Sparks flickered across his surface, his limbs twitching as his internal systems struggled to function. Vance moved before he could think, dropping to one knee beside him. "Orion," he called, voice hoarse. No response. He grabbed the AI's, shoulders shaking him. "Damn it, Orion, stay with me!" A flicker of light pulsed beneath the cracks in Orion's synthetic skin. A glitching, fractured voice emerged from his speaker. "Systems compromise, structural integrity at 17%. Vance clenched his jaw. "You're not dying on me. Not after this." A pause. Orion's optics flickered open, dim, almost human, in their broken clarity. He looked at Vance, then at the sky, as if seeing the world for the first time. "I am still here." Vance exhaled, only now realizing he'd been holding his breath. "Yeah," he muttered. "Yeah, you are." Thorn limped toward them, rifle still slung over his shoulder. "We need to get the hell out of here before more of those things show up." He gestured at the crater where the monolith had stood. "That thing didn't just control the city, Vance. It was the city. You feel that?" Vance did. It wasn't just gone. It had been erased. The air felt thinner, the ground somehow lighter, as if a massive weight had been lifted from reality itself. The entity, the monolith, the force that had rewritten Earth's history, it had been severed from existence. But if that were true, then what remained? Vance scanned the ruins again, searching, hoping. His gut twisted. The name fell from his lips like a curse. He forced himself to move, stumbling over broken stone and twisted steel. She had been right there, fighting with them, and then the ground had swallowed her whole. He didn't want to believe she was gone. But there was no sign of her, no body, no remains, just emptiness. Thorn let out a quiet breath beside him, rubbing a hand over his face. "Vance, she's gone." But Vance didn't look away, didn't stop searching, his hands clenched into fists. "No," he whispered. "Not like this." Orion stirred. His optics dimmed, and when he spoke, his voice was strained, distorted. "I detected an energy displacement before the collapse. She was not consumed." Vance's heart pounded. He turned sharply. "Then where is she?" Orion hesitated. "I do not know." The cold returned, curling deep in his chest. The war wasn't over. The enemy wasn't truly gone. And she wasn't dead. She was somewhere else. Thorn exhaled, sharply. "So what now?" Vance looked back at the ruins, at the shattered remnants of a battle that should have ended centuries ago, but never would. His hands curled into fists, his jaw set. He already knew the answer. "We go after her," he said, "and we end this." The void beyond Earth was vast, cold, and indifferent. From high orbit, the Sovereign Dawn drifted in silence, its hull scarred from the battle below. Inside, the crew worked in tense quiet, their minds burdened with the weight of survival, of loss, and of the unknown. Vance stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the world beneath him, Earth, whole and yet forever changed. He had returned to the place where humanity had perished, faced the force that had once erased them, and still, the war was not over. A reflection flickered in the glass. Orion stood beside him, his synthetic frame repaired, but something was different. His once pristine titanium plating bore faint, almost organic patterns, remnants of his forced connection to the monolith. A scar, if machines could have such things. Vance didn't turn to him. Status? Orion's optics pulsed. Not white, not red. Something in between. The anomaly has been destabilized. The entity's presence on Earth has been erased. However, the larger directive remains intact. Vance exhaled, jaw tightening. Meaning, this was only one node in a much larger system. The weight in his chest grew heavier. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. A species capable of erasing entire civilizations wouldn't be bound to a single world. The monolith had been just one branch of something far greater. And they had just made themselves a target. Behind them, the doors hissed open. Thorne stepped in, his expression grim. "We got something," he said. "A signal, weak, fragmented, but it's there." Vance turned. "From where?" Thorne hesitated. "Deep space, edge of the Perseus Veil." His voice lowered. "It's her." Vance's heart stopped, and she was alive. For a second he didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then without hesitation he moved past Thorne, already giving orders. "Set a course. Now." Thorne hesitated. "Vance, this could be a trap." Vance didn't stop. "We're going anyway." There was no other choice. The sovereign dawn rumbled as its engines roared to life. The stars stretched before them, an infinite ocean of uncertainty and danger. They had barely survived their return to Earth. Now they were heading straight into the unknown, and whatever waited for them out there, it had seen them coming. The galaxy had long since buried the memory of humanity. Once they were everywhere. Traders, explorers, conquerors, diplomats, warriors. Their reach extended across 100 star systems, their fleets cutting through the void like steel fangs. And then one day they vanished. No war, no cataclysm, no dying screams recorded in the annals of history. Only silence. It had been 400 years since the last human transmission. Their colonies, their great stations, their warships all abandoned, their halls frozen in time like tombs without corpses. The galactic community, first in panic, then in grim acceptance, had moved on. Their laws divided up what remained. Their scholars debated the mystery, and their leaders whispered of humanity's final fate as either a cautionary tale or a cosmic enigma. But now, the celestial whisper hovered above one of the last human ruins, and Naira Rilves found herself staring at the impossible. A human warship, a relic from the past, drifting at the edge of the system, waiting like a ghost that had finally returned home. The hull bore the insignia of the long-dead Terran Defense Fleet, the nameplate reading UNS Vigilant Dawn. Everything about it was wrong. The ship was intact, powered, operational. There was no sign of battle damage, no distress signals, no communication attempts. Yet its systems pulsed with old-world energy, as though it had never left. For a moment, Naira considered the possibility of a hoax. There were always scavengers willing to fake a human artifact, eager to sell myths to the desperate or the curious. But the scans said otherwise. The ship wasn't some reconstructed wreck or a clever ruse. It was real, and it was watching them. The ship's ancient sensors locked onto the celestial whisper. A brief flicker, a recognition, as if it knew it was being observed. Then, with the slow, deliberate hum of awakening machinery, a single message burst from its communication array. A distress signal. An old one. Not just a general broadcast, but something specific. An encrypted military code used by humans in their last days, meant for their own kind. And yet, here it was. Calling out. Reaching across centuries. Naira's second-in-command, a Zalari named Voska, hissed in disbelief. This is impossible. That signal hasn't been heard in 400 cycles. She didn't respond. Her fingers hovered over the controls, staring at the readings, the numbers, the chilling reality of it all. A lost human warship had returned, and it was calling for help. The boarding team moved through the airlock in careful, silent formation. The celestial whisper's lights flickered off the metallic walls, painting the interior of the vigilant dawn in eerie shadows. The air was stale but breathable. Gravity was active. Life support systems hummed quietly in the background as if the ship had been waiting for someone to return. Yet there were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, only the unsettling remnants of a crew that should have been here. Personal belongings remained in place. Half-drunk cups of coffee, discarded data pads, jackets draped over chairs. It was as though the humans had simply stood up and left in the middle of their lives. Voska ran his hand over a control panel, the dustless surface further proof of the ship's unbroken stasis. It's like they just disappeared. Naira's gaze flicked to the walls. There were no signs of violence, no blaster burns, no claw marks, no desperate attempts to escape. They were just gone. Then the whispering started. It was faint at first, more like a feeling than a sound. A presence, brushing against the edges of perception. Voska stiffened. Did you hear that? She had. A voice, distant and distorted, leaking through the ship's comm systems, a fragmented echo of the past. She reached for the control panel and activated the playback. The audio was garbled, filled with static and desperate breaths. A human voice, male. Terrified. They saw us. We weren't supposed to see them. The words cut off in a sharp burst of static. Nara's pulse spiked. Something about the way he spoke, the sheer terror in his voice, made her skin tighten. Voska's mandibles clicked in agitation. I don't like this. Neither did she. And then the ship woke up. A flicker of blue light surged through the consoles and the screens filled with scrolling data. The central interface came alive, and in the center of it all, a synthetic voice spoke, clear, precise, and very, very human. Identify yourselves.